Okay, we are live. I'm Floyd, and I'm with Trey. Trey Jadlow. Is that your?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And we're just going to have a informal discussion about Christian theism. Um, I'm a skeptic of Christian theism, and I guess Trey, why don't you, state your position or
Okay. Well, my name is Trey Jadlow. I live in Kansas City area, and I'm a born again Christian. Um, I've been a professing Christian. I think about 28 years now, and I am. I don't know. You might call me. I don't like the word fundamentalist Christian, but I am what would you be a traditional Christian. Um, I hold to the traditional standards of the Bible being the Word of God. Um, um, I don't know. As Floyd asked me before this, I'm a Calvinist, but I'm also Baptistic in my persuasion. Um, and I don't know. What else would you like to know, Floyd?
um, I guess, are you a young Earth creationist, old Earth creationist, theistic evolutionist?
I would be a young Earth creationist. I'm a yuck.
Oh, okay, alrighty, that's interesting. Um, I know in the last hangout I saw you subscribed to the Thomistic um first cause argument for the existence of God, and I saw your last hangout. You kind of said you started with two presuppositions, one uh, of rational coherence and the basic reliability of your senses and reasoning. Is that a kind of correct summation?
Yes. I guess the big difference for me between presuppositionalists would be that uh, I I begin uh, with presupposition of I differ. All right, a presupposition would say that you must begin with God epistemologically as a foundation, um, and I agree with them that you must begin with God ontologically as a foundation. But you cannot start there because you are a creature and you don't have the ego of God. Therefore, you must discover God. And so my end goal is to demonstrate logically that ontologically, there must be a God. But I don't start there because I don't think that you can start there. We've got to start with who we are, where we are, and the only way that we can have inquiry is to start with rational coherence. If there's no rational coherence, there is no inquiry. And you've got to have your sense perception, although it's very, very faulty. It's the only connection we have to this world in which we live, and so it's all we've got. And for my sense perception, I'm required to rely upon it merely to prove or to demonstrate that I exist as the inquirer. Again, if you want to deny that, there also is no inquiry or inquiry. So if you deny rational coherence and if you deny sense perception, there is no inquiry. So those two presuppositions are my foundations, and those are what I begin with. And thus far, to those who have been able to understand what I'm saying, I've never had anybody question those two presuppositions or to say that they don't agree. Floyd, would you be able to agree with those two presuppositions for inquiry?
Yes, yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said there. I think we have no choice as fallible human beings. I think we start with ourselves, and I kind of agree with R.C. Sproul, where he said we don't start with the autonomy of ourselves. We start with the consciousness of ourselves, and and from that we can recognize our finitude,
Mm-hmm.
that that we're not God, that we're fallible human beings, and we have to rely on our reason, our senses, and so forth. And from that, I feel I have other presuppositions which I consider like pre-rational which you have to use to then reason from. But those, the presuppositions that you talked about, I share as well.
Okay, so what would you say? What are the other presuppositions that you must have?
Well, another presupposition I have is that there exists a mind-independent reality. So it's the opposite of solipsism. So I think there's a world out there,
I see.
outside of my mind,
Mhm.
and I also believe there's other minds besides my own.
Okay.
Again, out there.
Mhm.
I believe the valid nature of deductive logic, reliability of induction, um, the concept of causation. When we see something occur from something else, we infer that. Can't be quite sure, but when we see someone step on a banana and fall down onto the ground, we infer that the banana actually caused them to fall on the ground.
Mhm.
Concept of truth, reliability of my memory. Uh, if our memory didn't work, I wouldn't be able to form a sentence. Because I'd forget the beginning of the sentence before I reach the end of it. And also, concept of self and agency. That would be another presupposition I have. So,
What was that? What was the agency?
the concept of self and agency. I'm an agent. I'm a personal agent.
Okay. Hmm.
So,
Okay. Well, that's great. What you said you're somewhat familiar with R.C. Sproul. I'm one to say the same thing, and I hate to say it because I know anybody who sees me gets tired of hearing the same thing, but basically everything I know I've learned from R.C. Sproul. What is it about his argumentation that you find to be objectionable?
objectionable.
Hmm.
Well, I haven't really read any of his literature too much. Uh, I just basically just listened to some of his lectures online. Um, I don't think I don't find him any more objectable than any other, I guess, Reformed theologian. Obviously, I simply disagree with Calvinism and Orthodox Christian theology in general. So, um, I think it would just be that. It, that I would disagree with R.C. Sproul. But I agree with his views on presuppositionalism, for example. And, I think we just talked about, two things that we share with him, where we start with the consciousness of ourselves and then go from there. Um, and I think the view with religion or with truth and knowledge in general is, we all kind of start with those presuppositions and then work from there. And questions of where we come from, what's right and wrong, the origin of the universe, you name it, all of those uh, big questions, is a debate over origins, so to speak. Where do we come from? Did some God create us, or did we come from some natural causes, or some impersonal causes?
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's the question, and I don't think we need, personally, I don't think we need to spend a lot of time, arguing over, are our senses reliable? Are you using your reason to justify your reasoning? It's something that, tricks that presuppositionists would do. I think we all kind of assume those things, and we just have to find, well, where are the origins of those things?
Hmm.
And I think that's what the true debate is really about.
Okay, so from your perspective, then, would you be willing to concede that contingency requires a self-existent agent in order to be?
Well, if something's contingent, it's obviously contingent on something else, right?
Hmm.
And then, from there you can have, like, if I'm contingent on my parents, for example, well, they're contingent on their parents, and then you have a chain going backwards and backwards. And I think intuitively we all kind of think, well, there had to be an original source that's non-contingent. Something that's self-existent that didn't come from something else. What could that be? For me, it's ultimately a mystery. It could be, I don't know, something in reality that's always existed that came about. But I guess the question is, and maybe you can argue for this, is does that source have to be a personal agent? Because I think that's the big question between kind of atheism and theism, where theism asserts that the ultimate source of reality is a personal mind, and that's definitely a possibility. But I feel there's not any convincing evidence for me of any particular mind in question. I mean, I don't rule out the possibility, but what our religions we currently have now have to offer, I don't find them very convincing. And Christianity is among them.
Okay, so do you agree that contingency, by definition, is purposive, since it had to be created and it is dependent for its existence in order to be? Therefore, the fact that it exists, by definition, proves purpose.
I don't think so. A conscious purpose. I think when something has meaning, when something has value, when something has purpose, I think it's for some need or desire or some goal, and so does the ultimate origin have to have a purpose, or have a purpose in creating contingent beings? I mean, that's certainly possible, but I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, but do you agree that if that which brings about contingency did not purpose to make contingency, it would not be? I don't see how you can escape that. Because it was created and sustained. We're dependent, not only in the initial sense, we're dependent for the next beat of our heart on that which gives us being. It must be purposing us, otherwise we would not be.
I'm not sure what you mean there, purposing us. I'm not sure what that.
Well, if it were not for the sustaining hand, if you will, of that which gives us existence, we would not be. We're dependent. That's what contingency means. We are dependent upon that which gives us being, and that being must be a self-existent being. Therefore, if that self-existence did not desire us or did not purpose us, we would not be.
I'm not sure how that follows. I mean, if you're talking about us, what are we dependent on? We're dependent on the air to breathe. We're dependent on food, water. We're dependent on shelter, clothing, perhaps. We might be dependent on living in a social environment. Perhaps we're social primates, so we might not be able to function alone like a spider, for example. So we're contingent and dependent on those things for our existence and our well-being. So I don't think anyone disputes that. But we wouldn't say air or food or whatever. I mean, those things aren't personal agents. They don't purpose us.
I agree. I would say those are material and instrumental in nature.
Right.
Are you familiar with Aristotelian causality? I always bring this up, but it's like really important. Um, are you familiar with how Aristotle broke causality down into several different types?
A little bit. If you think it's worth going over and it doesn't take too long, you could explain it.
No, I don't do everything very long. I'm pretty pithy. I like pithiness. Um, I mentioned it most of my hangouts. I hope it's not boring. Anybody's seen the others, but it's so helpful. What he did is he broke causality down into several different um, categories, and so what you've got is um, trying to think of a different analogy. I usually use a sculptor or a painter or something like that. We'll just say a sculptor. That's what he usually does. This is what RC does too. You've got the material cause for a sculptor making a sculpture. The material cause would be the granite or the block of stone or whatever he's going to make the statue out of. Okay, and then he's got the formal cause, which would be the blueprint that he has. Whether it be in his mind or on paper, this is what's going to guide me in what I'm going to make, whatever it is. You've got the final cause, which would be the cause of the reason why you're doing it. Oh, I want to make it for my wife, or the king commissioned me, or something like that. That would be the final cause. And then you have the instrumental cause, which would be the hammer and the chisel that he uses, the instruments that he uses to make it. And then the efficient cause would be the sculptor himself as he makes it. And so when you're talking about air and whatever else, other elements that are being used, they both have an instrumental capacity, and they also have a material capacity, but they're not efficiency. They're not willing to do anything. But we are. We are in a different category for that. We are seeking to survive. We are valuing life. And if we are valuing life, if you're going to say that there is not an ultimate objective valuer that has created us for a purpose and has valued us and created us for the purpose of value, you are left with a conundrum of trying to explain the reality of unintentioned intentionality. And this is like talking about a round square. It doesn't make any sense. You can't justify that.
Right. So I guess we're talking about how are we made, how are we designed, so to speak, and the intuitive thought is, for something to be designed, there must be a designer, we were designed, with functions, with features, and so forth. And I guess that leads us to believe, what sort of design are we? And there's kind of like two camps that we could talk about, or two forms of design. There's the teleological design, and there's also what's called the teleonomical design. Hopefully, I'm saying that right.
Teleonomy and teleology, yeah.
Right. So, with teleological design, that implies that it was planned by some agent, and that agent, enabled intention, purpose, foresight, and so forth. And then a teleonomical design has a quality of apparent purposefulness and goal directedness, and so forth. But there's not really an agent behind it, and in evolution, natural selection would meet that criteria.
Well, actually, it wouldn't. I think natural selection is an instrumental cause, but it's not a. I think the distinction with teleology and teleonomy is a straw man. It doesn't really matter if you want to say something has an overall purpose or something has a temporary purpose. Purpose is purpose, and a rose by any other name smells just as sweet. It's purpose, and if it's a purpose, all I need is one modicum of purpose, and a whole Darwinian synthesis utterly falls apart. And this is, I'm pretty sassy with Darwinian evolution because I just think it's a silly paradigm. I don't understand why people are so enamored with it. I just think it's foolish, frankly, because it has the value of existence when there is no valuer. It's just like magic. Things are trying to survive. If you look at the descent of man and Darwin's, oftentimes referring to the importance of evolving, the importance of existence, and yet they say there is no importance. Even I always say the title of On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. I mean, you could not get any more purposive with your language than is in a very, very title of his magnum opus. And so I just think to make a distinction between teleonomy and teleology is just a distinction without a difference from my perspective.
Well, you brought up value. I think value is just determined from our needs. Worms, right? Exactly, and I think that's where purpose comes from. I wouldn't say I have a purpose-driven life. I would say I have life-driven purpose. Life is what defines value, meaning, and purpose. Our nature and the environment we find ourselves in. If you look at nature, worms value their food. Tigers value their lives and their offspring.
Mm-hmm.
We as social primates, we value our life, being safe, healthy. We value our offspring, our security and comfort, our ease of life. We're always looking for comfort and so forth. And I think natural selection, accounts for these things quite well. And notice how us as social primates, we value our own lives and our offspring and our mates, before others. We value our family and kin before friends. We value our friends over acquaintances, and then we value our in-groups over out-groups and so forth. The circle here, each circle of concern, coincides, with our reproductive interests. So, I think it all kind of fits well, within evolutionary theory.
Okay, so is reproduction a goal from an evolutionary perspective?
Yeah, I mean, evolution, nature really doesn't care about us, but we were designed to reproduce. That's really what evolution is about. Those who reproduce, their genes carry on to the next generation. After you reproduce, nature really doesn't, isn't really concerned. Obviously, we are, but
why are we?
That's because that's the sort of critters we are. We value our lives.
Okay, but Floyd, you're not giving me an answer as to why that is so. And this is the answer I always get. Everybody always says, "Well, that's just the way it is." Well, I am asking how can unintentionality give rise to intention? I mean, it's not I'm not asking for a what is. I'm asking a why question. Why is it that we value that which is intrinsically invaluable?
Right. Well, it must. I don't know for sure, but I certainly think it's got to be tied into the origins of life itself. It comes down to desire. How is it that the first cell organisms had desire to perhaps seek food or to just sustain life and so forth?
Right.
How does biological life come from non-biological life, or from no life at all? That's certainly a great mystery. And I haven't seen any story from religion about a personal agent that's non-biological life as a convincing story to explain that, really.
Well, it would. I can't imagine how a religious story or meta-narrative could even have something like that, because that's the whole purpose, is it not? Is it not to give explanation? And the very first answer would be that of what I'm probing here now is that of value and purpose. Um, I don't, I think the skeptical view is exactly one half of a worldview. All it does is it says what is not, and it doesn't give any positive affirmation about what is. This is why atheism has never really been very popular throughout the history of mankind. And I think those people who think they're cutting a fat hog in the belly, in my opinion, in all charity, I don't think they're nearly as thoughtful and deep as they think they are. You've got to have some kind of matrix that can make unity out of diversity. That was the whole purpose of the mythology of ancient Greek and Roman societies. They knew that we need to have some kind of a moral imperative. We need to have some kind of unifying concept that can draw all of the diversities of life together into a unity. That's the greatest question of Western philosophy. How do we make unity out of diversity? And I think the disdain for philosophy in today's society is not a mark of their intelligence, but of their poverty of thinking. And these are things that we need to get back to. We need to start asking questions about metaphysics. We need to start asking questions about how to make unity out of diversity. People don't even understand these concepts today. And I'm hoping we can see a renaissance of such a thing.
Oh yeah, well, I definitely think philosophy has value. You hear some of these scientists like Lawrence Krauss and so forth, poo-pooing philosophy and so forth, and I think that's rather naive. Every scientific discipline and so forth has a philosophy lying under it.
Yeah,
But from what you were saying about atheism not having the answers, atheism is just a position on the existence of God. So it certainly doesn't create a worldview. I think you need to look at Western naturalism or physicalism or something like that if you really want to get into particular worldviews. But religion certainly offers ultimate answers. I mean, every religion offers that. Nietzsche said it best. He said, "To man, any answer is better than no answer."
Mm-hmm.
And with Christianity offers all the answers. It tells us the origins of everything, tells us what our position in the universe is now, and it even predicts the future. It even tells us what will happen, at the end. So I could see that certainly could be a comfort to a lot of people, an easy button. But I think historically, I think Christianity has come up with kind of wrong answers or answers that found to be wrong, and I think we're better off using secular means in science and in philosophy and our study of history and other disciplines to get better answers. If we see sickness, for example, what's the best way to handle that? Do we pray, or do we try to find medicine to actually?
Okay, so let me ask you a question. You just made a statement that was defining a moral a moral framework that would help define and bring unity to diversity, and that would be that we should value human existence. Okay. But you have no reason to say that. In fact, you, in exact contradiction to what you say is true about humanity, you say humanity is not intrinsically valuable, but we should pretend that humanity is valuable for really no reason except for your own personal fancy. Would that be correct, say?
Well, you say is valuable. For something to have value, it has to be valuable to something, to someone. Something just doesn't have value on its own, intrinsic value. it has to offer value to some sort of subject. Like let's look at food, for example. Food has no value to a rock, or to a car, or to anything that can't digest food. Food has value to those with digestive systems, or require nutrients. I guess a tree values, so to speak, moisture in the dirt and so forth, and flowers and so forth. So for something to have value, it has to have value to a subject.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody does not value human life, is there something wrong with them?
Well, I would say they're certainly different from the majority of us.
Okay.
The majority of us value our lives. We value our family. We value our loved ones, and so forth. And I think as social beings, that extends to community and so forth. But also historically and evolutionary means, we also are xenophobic in some respects as well. We protect our in-group and are worried about the out-group. And that's why we have wars and so forth. And of course, we have other wars for other reasons too. Basically, fighting over resources.
Mm-hmm.
Is a common example. So, and with the world becoming a smaller place, with world travel, with the internet and so forth, rising technology, if we value our lives, we're going to have to kind of extend our view of what our in-group is for us to survive. And you could ask, well, why should we want to survive? Well, is that arbitrary? Well, I think for most of it, it's ingrained in us. Think about it. We spend every second of the day, without exception, unless you can think of one, fulfilling some need. We're constantly breathing, for example. Mm-hmm. When we sleep, well, we're fulfilling our need for sleep, and also when we're unconscious and we're asleep and so forth, we're breathing. So we're constantly fulfilling needs, if not our own needs, to the needs around us. And again, I think that's what creates value, meaning, and purpose.
Okay, well, it doesn't create value. I mean, you're already saying it's already ingrained in us. It's part of our constituent being. And so you didn't really say what I wanted you to say. You said that if somebody does not value life, you merely said they were different, but there's not something wrong with them. So to say that somebody is pathological in their personality would be an arbitrary and really kind of a meaningless label to put upon them. Really, wouldn't you say that?
No, no. A psychopath, a sociopath, does have meaning to us, to those who are concerned about our lives and our well-being. So, again, words have usages, they have meanings. To whom? Well, to us agents, to us personal agents, and a psychopath can disagree that my life has value and the life of my family has value. They can certainly disagree with that, but for the majority of us, we don't see it that way. So therefore, we judge a psychopathic action of killing to be immoral, because that's the sort of creatures we are. But apparently, he doesn't share our same nature. Assuming that the psychopath's nature comes from his his brain, physiology.
Okay, so you would say there's something wrong with somebody who's a psychopath or a sociopath.
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's what I wanted you to say. All right, so there's something wrong with them because they don't value life, but you merely define value in life as to be a herd mentality that most people have. So therefore, would it be fair to say that your moral code is reduced to merely saying that right and wrong is merely the personal preference of the strong over the weak?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say my morality is based on my capacity for empathy and to reduce suffering and to.
Okay, well, you're assuming human value there. You said that human value is not an objective standard.
Well, it's again, it's our value. It's the value of humans.
Okay, but what if you're so Hitler was wrong because he was weak, right? If he would have been wrong if he could have been able to force or to I don't want to say force, but be victorious with his view over others, right?
No, because again, that doesn't follow my my personal view of morality. Again, it's grounded in my capacity for empathy.
It's
for
grounded
others.
in your emotion, right?
Well, no, it's just an emotion. I mean, it's grounded in my nature as a human being, my biology, my upbringing, my logical reason concerning human needs and the promotion of happiness, and so forth.
But that's just something that you you strongly believe that humanity is very valuable, but you don't give a reason for that. It's just an emotion that you feel, and you assume it as a moral imperative. Would that be correct?
Well, the foundation of that is our nature. It is humanity. If humans obviously didn't exist, we wouldn't see ourselves as valuable. But here we are, and it's our nature to live, to seek happiness. Again,
Okay, but you're just saying again, you're just saying that's the way it is, but you're not giving a reason as to why such a thing is the case. You're just saying this is the way it is. I'm just going to believe it in blind faith, even though it seems irrational. But I'm going to go with it. And this is my problem with this is my great fear with atheism. It's irrational and blind in its faith, and it can't give justification, and therefore I'm convinced it will lead to the unraveling of a cohering society.
Well, I don't have a moral cause for being moral. I don't have a moral reason for being moral. I have a causal reason for being moral, and that is that this is the way we evolved. This is the way we've become.
But evolution has no purpose, right?
Well, just as far as just transferring genes, keeping the genes going forward, reproduction. That's pretty much the only purpose. Evolution. Evolution's blind. It's the blind watchmaker. Is the name of one of Richard Dawkins' books.
Yeah, but the DNA are replicating machines for the purpose of survival, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're teleological or teleonomical in their nature. Again, we come back to the same thing, and people like to make the analogy of humans with rocks or water flowing or all that. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about humans. I'm talking about any type of sentient creature that is seeking to survive. I mean, I don't know how you can get by to say that that's an accident, that accidental purpose. It doesn't compute with me. I can't get my mind around that. I always say that I think, as R.C. Sproul stated this, that the only reason Darwinian evolution ever took off to begin with is because of the chrome and plastic. You can use the word, the chrome and plastic sexy of the day of a spontaneous generation. And because of that, it gave fertile soil. And about that same time, Louis Pasteur came and debunked it. I mean, it had been debunked somewhat before, but it wasn't popularized. And I think that Were it not for that fertile soil, I don't think Darwinian evolution ever would have taken off. And I think right now it's just it's going on ghost fuel. Um, it's totally purposive. Everything about it is purposive, and they speak with moral language all of the time. They get all excited when they find a new species and say that existence is somehow special. Then you ask them to rationalize. Oh no, it means nothing. It's utter contradiction. That's all I hear when I deal with people that adhere to the Darwinian paradigm.
I, I, I kind of think you're kind of talking about separate things. You know, evolution, you know, is a scientific fact, whether you agree with it or not. You know, science it's not science's job to find moral purpose in things. It's simply
Well, science itself is purposive. Why do science? I mean, everything is purpose everywhere, and I don't understand the contradiction. How people can hold on to these contradictions? Can you not see that?
Well, you know, we as human beings are curious beings, and we want to know where we came from and all those things, and that's why, you know, we use science. We get sickness, so we use science to discover new medicines and so forth to do that. Again, what's driving all this? You know, where are we getting this motivation from? Well, you know, in the last 15 minutes or so, I've been explaining it through our biological needs and wants and desires. You know, think of you know, how we invented the remote control for our TV. You know, because we're too lazy to get up and turn the you know, turn the knob on our TV. So someone invented the remote control device for our TV. You know, why did we do that? Well, out of our need for ease and comfort. You know, again, it's back to, you know, do we have a purpose-driven life, or do we have life-driven purpose? I think that's.
Well, it doesn't matter to me as long as you got that P word in there. You've got a problem, and by saying that it's just the way we are, is not a justification. And to say that life is special, and yet it's not special, I don't think it's helpful.
Well, again, when you say special or valuable, again, it has to be special or valuable to something. You know.
Right. And how do you have contingent valuer without an objective valuer?
I mean, we're valuers, right? And we objectively exist, so why aren't we objective valuers?
Because objective. Okay, here let's move into another section here. We're talk about the two distinctions between being and becoming, or actuality and potentiality. That there was two pre-Socratics named Heraclitus and Parmenides had an argument, and they were trying to you know, deal with these metaphysical issues, and they were trying to hammer out the difference between being and becoming. And you had Heraclitus, who came along and said that everything is changing, and when you step into a river and then you step back out of the river, it's no longer you, because you have changed, and that river is no longer the river that it was, because it has changed. And everything that we see is always changing and growing to generation and decay, and never seeming to be the same. But then Parmenides came along and said, whatever is. In other words, if there's not some unchanging reality to existence, then there really is nothing. And so those two hammered it back and forth, and we still to this day, you know, modern existentialism gets its you know, credentials and inspiration from Heraclitus, you know, back then. So nobody denies that there's such a thing as change in the universe in which we live. And this really goes back to my argument, the same thing as well, that there is change. But if there is change, there must be some, because change is stuff that happens, okay? And if you're going to talk about an infinite regress of effects or things that happen, you've moved into the realm of nonsense, because causality is merely an extrapolation of the law of non-contradiction. It's an application of it. And if something is an effect, it is something that, by definition, happens. Now, if something is happening, it must go back eventually to something that does not happen, something that is pure actuality, something that is self-existent, and it gives rise to that. So here we see this characteristic of personhood and volition in a changing sort of way, and it's not possible for us to postulate that just arising accidentally or unintentionally. We don't have purpose coming from accident. It's not possible to do that. And so what I refer back to is this whole thing of actuality and potentiality, being and becoming. There must be some ultimate being that gives us the ability to happen.
Yeah, so like you're describing the problem of identity, where we need some non-changing stuff or essence to define us. Is that what you're kind of getting at, or?
Well, if we are the happening type of being that there is, there must be something that doesn't happen. Let me talk about this. The principle of causality is analytic in nature. Analytic arguments are basically just arguments that are true by definition. They're tautologies. Okay. So you say a triangle has three sides. You know, triangle, three sides. You're just repeating yourself.
Right.
Okay.
As opposed to synthetic.
Right. So causality is analytic. It's not synthetic. It's just you're repeating yourself. When you say that every effect must have a cause, you are saying that, and the only way you can define a cause is to say that which gives rise to an effect. The only way you can define an effect is to say that which is the result of a cause. And so when you try to speak of an effect without invoking a cause, you've moved into the realm of irrationality. But by definition, that cause ultimately must be something that has pure actuality, that is not happening in any way. It just is, and it's not dependent. This is really the core of my argument.
Yeah. Well, again, we're back to what is the prime mover? What is the origin of all reality? Reality is always what it is, regardless of what's happening. As far as us, changing, do we need to have some unchanging soul to identify ourselves, or to make us special or anything? I really don't see it. Think of a sand dune, right? A moving sand dune. It's constantly changing. The particles of sand, are being blown in the wind, and so forth. But we identify a sand dune, and what are we actually doing? We're identifying the pattern. We're seeing the pattern which creates a sand dune. I think the same thing can be said with people as well. We have a pattern. We're born. We grow. We mature, and unfortunately, we get old and die if we're lucky to live that long. And just like how a sand dune changes with each grain of sand, our cells are constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
I think every cell that we were born with is probably not in us anymore. We're a slowly changing pattern over time.
And so in order to make any sense of that, though, that's all that stuff is happening. There's got to be something that's unified that enables diversity to happen, because diversity that is changing cannot happen in and of itself, because it is contingent by definition, right?
Well, again, the sand dune, blowing in the wind is contingent on the wind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
And we already went over what we're contingent on. for our existence, we were contingent on our parents, and for our lives, we're contingent on the air, food, water, shelter, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so if a sand dune is happening, obviously the wind itself is an instrument in using that is making a change in everything, but the wind itself is not self-existent, right?
No. Well, I mean, what creates a wind is imbalance of temperature.
Okay, and that which causes the temperature change, is it self-existent?
Well, I would think that comes from the sun, the clouds, the globe-shaped Earth that we lived on. That creates climate imbalance. Because you always have a hot side and a cold side. You have the seasons and so forth.
So, are any of those, say the sun, is it self-existent?
No, obviously that came from something else, and again, you have a chain. So you're back to what was the original essence. Was it, again, we're back to, well, what is it? Does it have to be a personal agent, or is it some sort of quantum flux, or
does a quantum flux happen?
Well, yeah, it would happen, but again, is that something that has to be caused? Is that an effect behind a cause?
If it happens, it is. That's what it means to be an effect. Effects happen.
Well, maybe it's not an effect.
Well, does it change in any way?
Well, I don't know a lot about quantum physics, but they talk about virtual particles just popping in and out without cause and so forth. So
that's rubbish.
Well, it's certainly
something cannot create itself before it exists. I mean, it appears to do so, but once you do that, are you familiar with the principle of explosion?
No. If you
look it up on Wikipedia, and it basically says that once you deny, all right, remember what I said, that causality is just an extrapolation of the law of non-contradiction. In other words, for an effect to make itself before it exists, it would need to be and not be at the same time in the same relationship. So when you come up with any kind of paradigm that denies the law of non-contradiction, at that very moment, the exact opposite of what you're affirming is also true at the same time, and all inquiry explodes. It's called the principle of explosion. And so when you want to say that particles are popping into existence by themselves, in other words, there's no existence, then there is existence, and it created itself before it exists, everything is gone. Science is just finished. And that appears to be that way. We need to do homework, but I'm saying people who affirm that are either lazy or disingenuous, and they need to not be that way.
Well, do you think that's an analytic statement you're making, or a synthetic statement?
The principle itself is analytic. In other words, those particles are effects, and therefore they must have a cause. And to say that they pop into and out of existence is to violate that principle, which again is a law of non-contradiction.
Well, again, maybe quantum physics doesn't really coincide with our Aristotelian logical view.
Okay, well then you need to prove that, and in order to do it, you're going to be employing Aristotelian logic, and we are violating also the principle of parsimony.
Well, I mean, there's other forms of logic as well besides Aristotelian, but again, it's a mystery. Can we say that from nothing, nothing comes?
If there ever were a time when there were absolutely nothing, what would we have right now?
Well, I don't see anything illogical with something coming from nothing. If you think it's illogical, I'd like to hear the argument.
I just did. If nothing exists, then how can it be affected into existence before it is? It's a violation of the law of non-contradiction, the principle of explosion. Since there's something right now, if anything exists right now, it is not possible for there ever to have been nothing. You can't even think of nothing. To think about nothing is to think a thought about nothing.
Well, again, I don't think there's any logical contradiction in something coming from nothing. It's certainly not intuitive,
It's absolutely intuitive. It's logical necessity. How could it have existed before it existed in order to make itself before it was?
No one's saying it does exist. As far as we know, if there's absolutely nothing, a total vacuum,
No, a vacuum is something.
I think we're just talking about semantics.
Well, we're talking very importantly semantics that Lawrence Krauss likes to play games with.
Okay, so you're saying there can never be nothing.
If there is something now, there could have never been a time when there was absolutely nothing.
All right, so there was always something, right?
Right.
Well, okay, so we're back to what was that something?
Well, it's self-existent. We know that, and we know that it's sentient as well because we are sentient creatures.
I'm not sure how that follows. How does that follow?
Well, how can something impart a quality to something else that it itself does not possess?
Well, think of a car. A car is made of metal, rubber, plastic, gasoline, so forth. Put it together, and it has a whole new function. From our evidence, we are here from less complex life, and the evolutionary model. We started out with single cell organisms that evolved, got more complex into the multi-celled creatures that exist today, or even extinct like dinosaurs in the past. So again, you're claiming that sentience can only come from sentience ever. Well, I think that needs an argument.
Well, that is the argument. Again, something cannot come from nothing, and you cannot impart. I'm surprised that you would compare a car to a living cell. I would say a car is rather herkish compared to anything in the biological world as regards to complexity. And a car is not sentient. A car is just it's a jalopy of creation. At the very best, the Lamborghini is. I don't know. I mean, I don't see the compelling argument of your or compelling nature of your argumentation at all.
Well, again, you're saying from sentience can only come from sentience. Do we know that?
Well, sentience is purposive, right?
What gives something purpose is, again, I explained, where purpose comes from. It comes from its nature itself.
Okay, but that's not giving an answer. That's just saying it just is. It's kind of a, I don't know, kind of a magic answer. It's just the way things are, and we need to accept it in blind faith and not inquire about it. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, I think we both agree that we're here, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're just debating where we came from.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Right. So I don't think we're arguing what our natures are. Again.
Well, I mean, would you say that you are? Actually, this is a very important point. Many evolutionary biologists would say that we have no such thing as a free will because they deny the idea of personhood. Where would you fall in that camp? Are you a compatibilist or
yeah, I'm generally a compatibilist. I mean, I haven't put a lot of study, into the question, of free will versus determinism versus compatibilism and so forth. I'm right. If I had to pick one, I'd pick compatibilism. I mean, we don't. Do we choose everything? If I have to choose between eating dirt and a steak, are both equal to begin with? Obviously not. It's based on my nature, and I didn't choose to like to eat chocolate and hate to eat feces. That's just my nature. So a lot of that obviously is going to determine my choices. But obviously there's a lot of choices to be made. What should I have for dinner? Should I have a hamburger or a hot dog? if I choose a hot dog, should I have sauerkraut or without? You know, there's a lot of questions. Um, I guess it's we're having a good conversation. I'm enjoying it. It's over an hour now. Um, I don't know if you want to. We can keep on going this if you want, or we could switch gears and talk specifically about Christianity if you want.
That's fine if you want to. That's fine. Oh, I thought maybe you're going to open it up to the other people. I can stick around for a while if you want to after, and we can do some questions or something, and do a post-show hangout or something like that if you want.
Yeah, I thought we were going to just we would just be the two of us, and then afterwards we'll start a separate post hangout. So, so for YouTube, this will be a isolated discussion, and then we'll have a separate post one, where I guess which would be just free form. Anyone can join.
I like that because I like them to be about like an hour and a half. Because it's just too long, and when you make it too long, it's just too tedious to watch, and I don't usually watch long ones either, so that would be great if we do that.
Yeah, I like that format too. I had a last debate I did, we went an hour timed, and then we had a separate post hangout afterwards, which was free form.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice just to have a nice, limited discussion, just the two of us, and then it's a lot easier. And I have trouble being in a hangout with 10 people, so forth.
Me too.
Yeah, everyone's talking over each other, and then to get your point in, you have to be rude and try to overtalk someone. And I just don't like that.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean, if you don't mind, if we could kind of switch gears here and just talk about Christianity in general. My path to being an atheist, I guess I just prefer the term non-Christian, who doesn't have a belief in any personal God. What that means, what label you want to put on that. I really don't care. But I was raised a Presbyterian, mainline Presbyterian, which is I guess they would consider it non-Calvinist at this point.
It was like USA, or what was it?
Yeah. At the time, well, I guess they changed organizations, but they're PC USA now.
Okay.
So the liberal, I guess the liberal Presbyterian as opposed to the Calvinistic one.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised Presbyterian, and just over the course of years, I just looking at the Bible, looking at arguments, there's certain claims and so forth, just led me to deny my faith. And I never considered myself I don't think I ever considered myself a real strong believer. I always had doubts.
Mm-hmm.
If someone asked me when I was my teenager if I believed in Jesus' resurrection, I'd probably lie and say yes. But in my head, I'm thinking, I'm just having trouble. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Sure.
I'm just having trouble, swallowing the story. And then I started studying the Bible critically and so forth, and all my hunches, all my instincts about what I felt was a problem with Christianity was just confirmed through study and scholarship and so forth. And in my college years, I actually befriended a Church of Christ preacher, very nice guy. We used to practice guitar together. He was very nice, and I really I respected his character. And I said, there might be something more in this Christianity that I overlooked. So I started doing Bible study with him, and I went to his church a couple times, and I realized, I saw his congregation, and I quickly realized that people are just people. I admired his character, but I realized that the reason I think he has a good character is because he put effort, human effort, into being that. Obviously, he was influenced by Christianity, and and his view of Jesus and so forth, things like that. But I think it was his human effort to live according to a strong, loving moral character is what really drove it. And I did have doubts, but in just in learning about the Bible, the history of it, adopting the historical critical method of studying the Bible and so forth, I come to the conclusion that if there is a God, it's not the Bible God. I believe in evolution. I believe the world is millions of years old. You read Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven, the earth. Well, science says the earth wasn't created at the beginning. So if science is correct, then who created the universe? Who created the earth and so forth? Well, we can cross the Christian God off that list. There might be some other God that did it, but the Christian God, isn't a candidate. At least that's my view. And then, going on to learn more about the Bible, I learned about the documentary hypothesis of the different sources of the Old Testament and so forth. I learned about how Genesis 1 is the priestly source, and it basically contradicts what starts at Genesis 2:4b, which is the J source. They're just simply different stories that contradict each other. It's come from different sources. One priestly, the J source is probably a Levitical source. So from that, I really don't see a coherent story in the Bible. I just see a lot of stories put together, and then different religions just created systematic theologies around it. I just basically abandoned Christianity. Although I still love to study the Bible. I think it's very interesting with its history and so forth. It has a lot of mysteries of who wrote what at what time for what reason and so forth. A lot of good history, but for me, Christianity does not offer good answers to what I think needs to be accounted for. What we know today. So again, or perhaps some sort of God created this everything, in reality, but I don't think the Christian God is a good candidate for that position.
Okay. I sense that maybe would it be fair to say that a strong problem that you have with the Christian God would be his moral character?
That would definitely be a factor. Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You read the Old Testament. You see the evolution of this God, starting out as like a Zeus type character, basically the God of the Jewish people, the Israelites, who eventually got promoted to the head of the gods and eventually the only God when Judaism turned into strictly monotheistic around the Babylonian exile.
Now, are you just repeating what you've read somebody say, or have you thought that through?
I mean, I've been studying this for years. I'd say a good, 30 years at this point.
Okay, so what evidence do you have that the Israelites were polytheistic in their nature, beginning with Abraham?
Well, I mean, you can find polytheism in the Bible itself. I think there's probably a great example of that is Deuteronomy 32:7-9, where it states that Yahweh got his inheritance, which was the Israelite people, from his father El Elyon, the Most High God, along with the other sons of God. and you see other thing. You see El having his consort, his wife Asheroth, in the first temple. They only worshipped El, or I'm not sure if they actually used the term Yahweh at that stage, but they also had Asheroth and the snake god. Boy, I can't believe I'm drawing a blank here. Nehushtan. They had a figure of Nehushtan in the first temple as well. Later on, Asheroth and Nehushtan got expelled from the temple as they started to go to henotheism. But you have other examples as well. For example, I think the king of the Moabites, he sacrificed his firstborn son to their god and was able to defeat the Israelites in a battle because of his sacrifice. So I mean, there certainly seems to be polytheistic roots, and all the critical scholars agree that Jewish history started out as polytheistic, and then by the time of the return of the exile, I guess it started with a lot of reforms from Hezekiah and King Josiah. It started to become monotheistic, and it really turned into Yahweh only, and they actually they went around killing the priests of the other high places around the area, so to centralize the religion to Jerusalem.
I don't think you've made a case for the case that there was more than one God who are being worshipped yet. I mean, you've skated over a lot of facts that you apparently have read somewhere or something, but I want some evidence. I mean, if you want to go to some scripture, let's exegete some scripture here that says that. It sounds to me like you're just repeating what somebody has told you, what you've read. Critical scholarship is very much guided by an anti-supernatural bias. And what we've got to do is have an open mind, and certainly I think if somebody's going to make supernatural claims, it's going to take some significant evidence to justify that. But to say that it's not possible, I mean, I compare that idea with the idea of, say, for example, evolution that says that everything basically made itself for a purpose for no purpose. That's why I mock Darwinian evolution. I see things like that, and just so somebody says, for example, somebody to rise from the dead, if in fact there is a creator, somebody rising from the dead is rather trivial, or any of these things that happen. Now, I will grant you that we have a higher bar because we are saying things like miracles have happened, but I think that you can look at the sources and you can demonstrate, I can demonstrate that what the manuscripts that we have are actually what was written down at the time, and that it can prove itself to be historically accurate. In fact, Luke has been said to be the most accurate historian of antiquity. And the greatest, Sir William Ramsay went and checked out Luke's work, and he was in a liberal school, and they had taught him that Acts was written 100 years after when it actually happened. He says, well, there's no way somebody could live outside of Palestine and be able to give accurate information. And he was a skeptic when he went there, and he went to go and disprove Luke. And he ended up becoming a Christian, and he wrote a work on it, and saying that Luke is of the greatest of historians of antiquity. You can press him as far as you want, and he will stand the test of archaeology as being a faithful and careful witness to what he saw.
Well, I obviously disagree. I heard that argument before, that Luke was a great historian, and I assume you believe that the author of Luke wrote the book of Acts as well. Is that, do you agree?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I recommend Richard Carrier actually has a online lecture on YouTube, which actually shows that the author of Luke was not a good historian. I can actually there's good evidence.
You know, can you not give me Richard Carrier? I mean, okay. Please.
But there's other scholars too that
give me some scholars of his. I want to know some of his peers that approve of what he says. I mean, Bart Ehrman laughs at him. And I don't have any respect for the guy whatsoever. Show me a corpus of textual scholars who say Richard Carrier is to be listened to, because I've never seen him. And
Well, no, I mean, I have problems with some of Richard Carrier's stuff as well, but I mean, just look at Yale has a lot of online lectures for free. Look at the lectures of Dale Martin, for example, or you'll learn any of this stuff. You'll learn the documentary hypothesis in certain seminaries, like in a Methodist seminary, you would learn about the documentary hypothesis,
which is bunk. Okay, I can tell you what's his name. There's a book called The Heresy of Orthodoxy. It's by Michael Kruger, where he debunks the Bauer hypothesis and shows that it's a quite reliable. The testimony that we have right now. I'm reading it right now. Floyd, all you're doing is you're giving me stuff that you've read, and it's all by people who have a very strong anti-supernatural bias.
I really don't agree. I mean, the historical critical method is not anti-supernatural. It's just treating the Bible like you would any other text. And you're employing things like source criticism, form criticism, redaction criticism, and so forth. I think it's absurd to think that Moses actually wrote the entire Pentateuch. I mean, it's just ridiculous. There's this, I can just state some evidence for that if you actually think Moses actually wrote the Pentateuch. I mean,
I'm utterly convinced that he did.
Oh, so Moses wrote about his own death? And burial? He wrote about that?
I don't know. I have to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, there includes cities, in it that didn't exist until well after the time of Moses. Around 1450 BCE. The city of Dan, for example. Didn't exist until 1,000 years later, after the conquest. Just look at the form literature. If you want to see like a break in between the P version and J version, for example, read Genesis 1. You'll see God, Elohim, is the Hebrew word being used there, and it's actually a plural noun, the gods, right, so to speak. Starting at Genesis 2:4b. They no longer use the word God. It says Lord God, Yahweh Elohim. Mm-hmm. So they're actually, and you can actually, if you actually look at it, if you actually read the Old Testament, keep an eye out on how they use the word God in the English. Elohim to Yahweh. You'll actually start seeing the divisions in the source, and you'll actually see that with the Noah story as well. There's actually two separate Noah stories. Interwoven. One story says Noah should bring a pair of every kind of animal into the ark. The other story says you should bring 7 pairs of clean and 7 pairs of unclean onto the ark. And it's kind of interesting because clean, kosher laws didn't exist until supposedly the time of Moses. So it's kind of a clue that the story was written later as well. But I mean, there's a lot of good evidence, and I invite you to kind of read what the higher critics propose about the Bible. I don't think they have an anti supernatural bias at all. I don't think they don't adhere to the doctrine of inerrancy, and that's probably what you have a trouble with. But a lot of scholars, a lot of preachers and so forth, they have no problem accepting the higher criticism of the Bible. It doesn't really take away from the theological message of Jesus' atonement, really.
Well, I don't. If it's not inspired, and if it's not inspired, it's not inspired. But if it's not inspired, how would you know what portions are applicable and what portions are not?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and I'm glad it's not my problem. But what can we consider true? Well, I mean, how do we do that in history? Well, we determine something. We determine a historical fact or something that's highly probable to be historic when we have is independent confirmation. When we have independent sources confirming the same act, and the more we have, the better. The more we can be confident that something was a historical, fact. So, I think when the Old Testament mentions some of the gods, some of their kings and so forth, and some of the historical things that took place, like the Babylonian exile and things like that. Some of those things can be confirmed, but other things we simply can't confirm, like the existence of Moses, the Exodus we can't confirm, some of the conquests we can't confirm. In fact, some of the cities they mentioned that were conquered were actually destroyed well before that time. So again, I guess at this point it comes down to what good reasons we have, or what are reasons do we have to reject the Bible. And I think I have a lot of them. I think there's a lot of errors, contradictions. We have the moral character of Yahweh in question. In fact, the last debate I had was a debate over whether or not the Bible God is a loving God, and in that I argued that he's not, based on his own standard of 1 Corinthians 13. I argue with that. I don't want to kind of rehash that argument, but you can watch that on my YouTube channel, later. And if you want to, if we want to talk about that in another hangout, I'd be more than willing to do that. But I looked into prophecy claims of the Bible, and I learned that the prophecy claims of the New Testament of Jesus weren't really prophecies at all. They're really more esoteric meanings that they apply to the Old Testament using like Pesher exegesis and so forth. But it really was taken out of context. Or
like what?
For example, the Psalms, for example, they were individual lament psalms, not really meant to be prophecy. I guess a simple example would be where Matthew quotes Hosea 11:1, out of Egypt I called my son. Well, if you read the whole verse, it says, when I brought Israel out of Egypt, I call him my son. So Matthew's actually taking only half of a verse and turning it into a prophecy about Jesus. If you read the context more, it complains about how his son Israel started worshiping other gods. Now, can you apply that to Jesus? When did Jesus worship other gods? So it's clearly taken out of context. And what the New Testament writers were doing, they were using what's called Pesher exegesis, and they weren't the only ones doing it at that time. The other Jewish communities were doing it as well. That's very evident in the Dead Sea Scrolls community. So it was a very common practice at the time.
Okay.
So,
well, can I ask you? I want to know. I mean, this prophecy thing fascinates me. And I had heard an answer for that one, in fact, just a few weeks ago, but I don't remember what the answer was that I called you out of Egypt and what the application was of that. But I want to talk about the real specific, like the proto-evangelion of Genesis 3:15. What are your thoughts about that? I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed, and you shall bruise him on the head, he shall bruise you on the heel.
Right. I mean, that simply just explains why snakes and humans, get along with each other. The snake will bite the human, and the human will step on the head of the snake. I don't think it's anything more than that.
Okay, so you don't see a promise of a Messiah coming through the lineage of Eve through that?
No, not at all.
So
No,
that
I think most of the so-called Old Testament prophecies about Jesus weren't meant to be prophecies at all. Again, they're either individual lament psalms, birth or coronation oracles of
okay, but
former kings.
I want to talk specifically about some prophecies here that I find them to be amazing in their content. So we see in the Proto-Evangelion, we see the prophecy of the serpent was Satan, and he said, I will put enmity between you and a seed, or you and a woman, between your seed and her seed, and he shall bruise your head or crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. In other words, the serpent would do something to this one who would come from the woman, but he would destroy the serpent. And then further, you see in Abraham, in the Abrahamic covenant, in Genesis 12, he says, I will bless you and make you a blessing. I will bless the entire world through your seed, and you shall have more descendants that can be counted than the sand on the seashore and the stars of the sky. And then we see further the concentric circle is getting tighter. So first it's going to be a man, then it's going to be from the tribe of Abraham, then it's going to be from the tribe of Judah. And Judah in Genesis 49:10, I think it says, out of you, Judah shall not depart until Shiloh, the man of peace, comes. And then further we see that it coming from the line of David. He says, I will establish your descendant as a throne forever on my people. And then we see the sacrifice of the lamb who had to put the blood of the doorpost over the sacrifice. And when John the Baptist sees Jesus coming, he said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. The whole sacrificial system in the Old Testament was for the pointing of something that would come, the death of someone who would come to make propitiation for their sins. I mean, it's the warp and the woof of the Jewish people, and how you can say that's trivial and those prophecies are trivial is amazing to me.
Well, again, I think you're just reading the Gospels back in the Old Testament. I mean, again, Genesis 3:15. I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So it's just all it's doing is just explaining why serpents and humans don't get along with each other. The serpent will bite humans, and humans will step on serpents. I don't see Jesus in that verse.
You don't see God referring to something other than animals and humans there?
No.
They just fell from grace. They were in perfect union with God, and now they are at enmity with God. They are kicked out of the garden, but he promises somebody's going to come and he's going to make it right someday. You don't see that.
Well, where does it say that in the story where someone's going to make it right someday? Where does it
say says, you shall bruise him on the heel and he shall crush your head. Someone who would come from the seed of the woman. Do you not see? I mean, the whole.
Yeah. Humans will step on snakes.
So God doesn't care about redeeming his people.
In that story, no. He doesn't want the competition.
So the greatest cataclysm comes to the human race, and God says, "Oh, so what? Oh well, doesn't matter." No, he says no. That I'm going to bring a savior. I'm going to redeem you. I'm going to bring you back to the place of peace with me again.
Where does it say that in the story? He's going to bring a savior.
I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed, and she shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel.
Right.
There's going to be a fighting between man and woman, and her descendant is going to destroy the power of the serpent who cursed mankind by bringing him into a place of disrepute with God. That doesn't seem simple?
I think you're reading a whole lot into the story that's not there.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it just simply says that serpents and humans are it gives a reason why they don't get along, just like it gives a reason while childbirth is painful, why people have to work hard in the fields to
So what were the Jewish
farm.
people looking for when Jesus showed up on the scene? Was it just an accident?
What were the Jewish people looking for?
Yeah.
I mean,
when they said Hosanna in the highest, what were they meaning when they said that? Hosanna means save now.
Right. Well, in the narrative, yeah, that group was cheering supposedly a new king,
who was to be the savior, right? When they read the Old Testament, did they see a Messiah in there?
Well, again, for Messiah for the Jews was just an anointed one, right? Not an atoning sacrifice.
Well, no, actually, yes, it was. I mean, if you study the Essenes, we just learned about this with the falling of in the Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Essenes believed that there were two messiahs, which he kind of got it right, because some of the Messianic passages.
Yeah, right. That was the Essenes, but did the Sadducees have that view?
No, they didn't. But I'm saying that there were many different views, and it was very confusing.
I mean, the Dead Sea Scrolls
to them because in some places
had the teachers of righteousness, and they used the Pesher method to interpret the Old Testament, and the teacher of righteousness himself interpreted the Old Testament for them, and those verses was about him, actually.
But they knew that there was this dichotomy between messiahs, and that's what led some people to think there were two messiahs. There was a conquering king who would come and destroy, and there was a suffering servant, for example, in Isaiah 53, where he would come and make the payment for the people's sins. Again, that's in that line I was talking about. He's wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our well-being fell upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. The prophecies in Isaiah 53 is amazing. But so the Essenes believed that there were two messiahs, and then at the very end, they were going to submit to the final Messiah, who was Michael the Archangel, which some people believe that the writer of Hebrews was speaking to the Essene heresy, if you will, to say that Jesus is much greater than the angels. That's the whole message of the book of Hebrews. But the Jewish people were living, it was a very warp and woof of who they were, looking for this Messiah who was promised in the Old Testament, who would come, and you wave it off with a hand and say, oh no, it's just nothing. They weren't looking for that.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different views of the Messiah. I mean, some Jews weren't even...
But the Messiah was, right? I mean, they lived their lives looking for the Messiah, even today, right?
Not all Jewish communities. There are many different Jewish factions at the time. Some were looking for a second Joshua. Some were looking for a new Davidic king. So forth.
And they were all Messianic figures, right?
Yeah. Again, there's different views of what the Messiah would be. Would he be a king? Would he be a high priest? Would he be a great warrior? Possibly all three, combined into one. And there were many different Messiah figures popping up at that time. Just not Jesus. There was a bunch. There's Judas the Galilean. There was in 135. There was Simon Bar Kokhba. There was quite a few at the time. So Jesus, if there was a historical Jesus, is not unique as far as being declared a Messiah. You were saying a whole lot of prophecies in there, like Isaiah 53. I think you're probably aware that the Jewish people believe Isaiah 53 is actually talking about the Jewish people themselves, and there are a lot of verses within second Isaiah. I'm not sure if you subscribe to the view that starting at chapter 40 is considered second Isaiah, which was written around the time of the Babylonian exile. But it doesn't, again, it just to say, oh well, that points to Jesus is simply a post hoc interpretation to it.
Okay. All right. I need to go to the bathroom. Is it possible for us to wrap this up? Maybe we could do the post show.
Sure. Yeah. Well, oh yeah. Oh, it's been like an hour 38 minutes now. So, but yeah, good conversation. It was lively and informative, and I like when we have conversations and information is given out, just not disagreements, but information is shared and distributed. I think that's the greatest value in any of these conversations, where we learn new information.
Mm-hmm. No, I
So,
appreciate it. I've enjoyed talking with you, Floyd. You're an articulate fellow and very kind, and I enjoyed the conversation. It's helpful to me as well.
all right, great. I'm going to end this hangout, and I'm going to start a new separate hangout where anyone is invited, and we can anyone can join, and we can discuss and answer questions and continue on with this, or even start up new topics. But the great debate continues. So, all right. Thanks a
All
lot,
right,
Trey.
thanks, Floyd. All right, I appreciate it.
All right.
Mm.
Bye now.